All right, let's get going. I am delighted to introduce our guest today, whom I have known for, 20 years, I think. Stephen Chung is an architect, and he's also the host of PBS's new program, Cool Spaces. Stephen is a registered architect and principal of Stephen Chung Architect. His Boston-based studio focuses on small to mid-sized residential and hospitality projects. In 2009, he was named one of Metropolitan Homes' Rising Stars, which profiled his residential projects. Also in 2009, Casas Internacional published a monograph dedicated to 11 of his residential projects. He has worked with Philippe Stark, Richard Meyer and Partners, and Machado and Silvetti in Boston. He received his architecture degree from Harvard University. He has taught design and drawing at several institutions, including Cornell, the Rhode Island School of Design, the University of Texas at Austin, and Yale University. Most recently, he was and at Northeastern. Most recently, he was visiting critic at Syracuse University. He is the creator and host of a new television show for public television called Cool Spaces, The Best of New Architecture. In the show, he leads viewers on a tour of the world's newest and most provocative architecture. You can find out more at www.coolspaces.tv. He has appeared as on-air talent for many design programs on HGTV, the Travel Channel, Fine Living Network, and the Showtime Network. He has hosted a series of videos about architecture for the American Institute of Architects and is also the host of a live TV broadcast of the National AIA Convention called Architect Live. Please join me in welcoming my friend, Stephen Chung.
That's very embarrassing. Thank you, George. So this is going to be a little bit different than your other presentations. I looked over the list of really distinguished guests. I think George has done an amazing job giving you bringing some really interesting people in here. And I say unique and different because unlike those guys that are so successful in the fields that they chose, I am not, as an architect that is. And the idea always that I would be a very successful architect, and now I found myself on a different path. So it's a little bit different, and I want to talk about that path. Are there architects in the audience? Oh, there's George. I know George is an architect. Okay, because for some reason I felt like that there would be more architects as part of your speakers, but there's few, and I think it's important because I have a warped view of the world, and I prefer that other architects present their perspective before you hear mine, because I think that the show really comes out of my experience in architecture and really failure, having a really hard time with practice. Despite the nice biography, I think the reality is that I had a very hard time in practice, and really this comes from that. This was not a producer coming to me with an idea for a show. This is not, I never said, oh, I want to be on TV. It was none of that. This all really comes from a very hard time in architecture. Let's see a quick video so you get a sense of what this is about. Now, I should explain that George mentioned this is on PBS. It'll be debuting this spring with 4 episodes. Part of PBS's mandates is that new programs, or programs like this, they prefer that they be a little bit more energetic, not dry and academic, not a lecture, which is good for me because that's not really what I want to do either. I really want to kind of show what I like about architecture, and hopefully people will find it interesting. Let's see. All right, so now this is just a quick little promo, and after we watch it, I can sort of talk a little bit about how it came into being. Let's see. Okay, well, that's fun, but now this comes from, this is 7 years to get to where I am now. And I have to tell you that, and I have to give a little bit of background, because if I just simply talked about this show and what it's going to be in the spring, it would be not giving you the full picture of why, again, why do this? Because I never had any interest in being on television, never had interest in doing any of it, and it really only comes out of, as I said, having a very hard time in practice. And I know the other architects you had this semester, I mean, some of them are my friends, and they're very successful, and I'm sure you saw some really great projects. I think I had a reasonable start having an office in Boston, doing all of that, but like, many others, ran into the recession, having a very hard time in 2007, having to close the office down. And not only that, I mean, then having to go back and to the corporate world and try to sort of start over again, and being let go 2 more times, and thinking that, maybe I'm not good enough, or I just couldn't do it, when the reality is, of course, many people had a very hard time. And if you look at the numbers, it's really amazing to think that basically 1/3 of the profession is gone in 4 years. Imagine the medical profession, or law, or whatever other profession, but being eliminated in such a short amount of time. And sort of this was lost on me when you're sort of immersed in it and not really thinking about it. It was a very hard time, very hard time. So, during this time, this is where, when you decide to go back and try to figure out how to get a job, and which I had never had to do, this is a time in the mid-2000s where you have news sites like Monster.com and things like that emerging, and not wanting to, out of embarrassment, not wanting to go to my friends and try to use that network to find a position, I said, okay, I'll just go online and maybe I can find a job that way. And simply typed in architect, Massachusetts, and, wow, pops out 300, 200 jobs. And I think, okay, this won't be so hard. And of course, later you realize, as you start to look at these listings, I mean, what does it say? Solutions architect, applications architect, electronics architect. I say, what's happened here? What happened to my profession? And there was, in fact, when I did this several years ago, there was only two design architects, building architects. Now suddenly we had to say that was what we were called. And somewhere along the way of being kind of my head down trying to practice, our name was co-opted by another industry. They said that we're called architects now. And I just wanted to make sure that this was, wanted to make sure that architects is still what I thought it was, and it still seems that it's the #1 listing. Architects is someone who designs buildings. Now, in popular media, and I had during that time lots of time to watch television, I was interested to see what people's impression of what an architect is, and
Well, isn't an architect just an art school dropout with a tilting desk and a big ruler?
No, it's not. I can discuss other things, architecture.
You are very knowledgeable.
I'm also an architect. I'm an architect. I'm an architect. I'm an architect. I'm not?
I don't see architecture coming from you.
What do you design?
Railroads.
I thought engineers do that.
They can.
So there's some question as to what an architect does, I guess, but it still seems that the mention of the word is a positive thing. And sort of kidding aside, I mean, projects like Bilbao, this is, you must know, this is the Guggenheim in Bilbao, Spain. I mean, this is designed by Frank Gehry and single-handedly, supposedly transformed the fortunes of a city. And despite the fact that most people have not visited this building, everyone knows this building, and you juxtapose this with the kind of explosion of photo sharing sites and blogging and all of that, this becomes well known to everybody. And again, the headline is that this building, this piece of architecture can transform a city, transform the fortunes of a city. And it gives the impression that, again, that somehow architecture is doing very well in a time where maybe it's not. And despite his protestations of being a star architect, a relatively new term that George despises, but basically a star architect, becoming very well known in the popular media. I mean, when you were immortalized on The Simpsons, you have arrived, and it seems that architecture has now crossed over and become acceptable. Again, maybe things are better than, at least to the general media, popular media, that we're doing quite well. And again, the reality for someone like me who's an architect that's focusing on residential design, when you look at statistics like this, it's kind of sobering, right? I mean, you think less than 1% of all houses in the United States are designed by architects? You say, well, what happened? And so, well, I mean, it's builders, it's engineers, it's all these people have kind of moved in on the territory of architects. I think, unfortunately, many architects have seemed to sort of abdicate responsibility and fighting harder for that space, instead competing with one another for the fewer and fewer opportunities there are. This is, I think, the reality. Now, as a practicing architect in this arena, like, let's have one scenario. Let's say that somebody wants to build a house, and he says, well, how much will it cost me to have an architect design a house? And I say, let's say it's 10% fee. So that's $20,000. That's what it would cost. It's expensive, let's say. But if we think about it as the biggest investment, let's say, that someone will make over their life, that this is a place that you may raise a family, you may live there for 20, 30, 40 years, you may pass it down generations, you're going to live there every day of your life, somehow this will affect your every day in your life. They say, but if I went to this website, homeplans.com, I could get that for $99. And I say, I have to work very hard to explain the value of an architect, or we just throw our hands up. And unfortunately, I think what's happened is so many architects have thrown their hands up and said, I'm just going to forgo this segment of the population. I'm just going to sort of work harder for those fewer opportunities. And in the meantime, popular media seems to have kind of redefined what an architect and designer is with shows like this, which I find, pretty upsetting, because one of my friends is actually on here, and I ask him, what is he doing? I don't understand. And so this is where this comes from. This is why I made this. And I say I made this, and not to take all the credit for it, but it wasn't like a producer came to me and said, hey, let's do a show. Or someone else came to me and said, I've got an idea. This is really me getting beaten down from 2007 and saying, we have to figure out a way to explain what architects do and why it's important. And we have to do so, and apparently in an entertaining way, a way that will engage people, not just architects, because I don't really care about architects anymore. I taught for a long time. I really care about non-architects. I care about actually you guys, and trying to explain what we do, again, why it's important. So if I just tell you what the basic concept is that each episode consists of, it's 1 hour long, it has 3 different buildings. They all share the same type, meaning the first episode is performance spaces. So that really consists of a stadium, an arena, concert hall and an arena. So there's 3 different building types. And it's 20 minutes per building. That's actually pretty long, but boy, that's, in order to meet the kind of pace of today's television, it does have to go, there's a lot of content in that short amount of time. And the idea is that each episode will really follow the project, not just about the design, but really the entire process. And some of these are 20 years long, where an owner will say, we have a need, or a city has a need. And we really begin with that person, those people, that organization, follow through to the architect, that design process. Then it's really going to the finished building. It's not a construction show. It's really going to the finished building, really picking off different details, talking about what the salient features of the building, and then it's really experiencing the building and seeing it used. So if we then talk about, let's say that one of the first episodes is about the Dallas Cowboys Stadium. This is the former stadium in Dallas, and basically it no longer was going to be useful for a 21st century team like the Dallas Cowboys. It really no longer suited the brand. It was substandard in every single way. And basically you have the owner of the Dallas Cowboys saying, this is the design challenge. We have a worldwide brand. Our brand, this is what he assigned. He said it's an international brand, it's a progressive brand, it's a cutting edge brand. He wants to redefine the sport going experience. In fact, he calls it an entertaining experience. He wants it to extend it beyond sports. It's going to be much more than that. He says also in a time where people don't feel the need to go to the stadium, why not just stay home and watch it on television? He has to beat that. He's got to do better than that. And that's his assignment. So this is really kind of how one of the stories goes. This is kind of the arc of one third of a show. He enlists this architect. Now, he went on a worldwide search to find the best architect in the world, and he did meet many of the architects. And I don't know if you know anything about the owner. I mean, he's a very hands-on person, and he needed to find the right person, and that's this guy, Brian Truby from HKS Architects in Dallas. He was a younger guy at the time and a very mild-mannered guy, and was able to kind of work with Jerry Jones in a way that could translate into realizing the vision. And we do then track through kind of the process. We go all the way back to the very beginning. I mean, you know the finished building probably, but it's kind of neat to see these first sketches. Like, what was the thought process? You have an older building, an iconic building. You have to find a way to pay homage to that older building. At the same time, you're thinking completely forward thinking. There's a very strong idea about trying to have a very welcoming plaza, a building that will have basically the roof can open, and there's a kind of a gate that opens up and slides forward, and really the idea being that these doors kind of open up and embrace people and sort of welcome them into the building. And finally, that's that iconic image of the original Dallas Cowboys Stadium. It's a big hole in the roof, and he needed to somehow recapture that. And finally go back to the sort of final sketch, and you sort of see all of that come together. It's kind of neat to see that, because this is really the first sketches the architect is making when he's presenting to the owner of the Cowboys and the organization. And then we're in his office, and we really do then track through that design process from those first sketches into the sort of more developed renderings. And then this firm uses a proprietary software. It's a way to build basically the finished building at a very big scale and with every single detail, where you can animate with sun and people and all of that, with audio, to really make the owner and the team feel like they're inhabiting the final building. And you can see some of the final renderings and a cutaway of the building. So this is some of the architecturals, of course, things that I'm very interested in. But then again, I mean, what's really important is what does the final building look like, and how does it perform? And so this is the finished building. And of course, then we walk around with the architect to really get a sense, and I'm an architect as well, and we really try to find a way that we can find some common ground so that the dialogue is at a place where everyone can understand it. But we do really go around the building and try to understand some of the salient parts of the building. We also talk to some of the key people. For example, the guy in the middle there is an acoustical engineer, and his challenge is very interesting, because for a sports stadium, you want to maximize the sound. It helps the team. But this is also an arena that has lots of concerts, and so suddenly lots of sound is not necessarily good, but you want to have quality sound. So he had a very interesting challenge. And we really do then go through a series of challenges, and how did this design team meet all those challenges? And maybe one thing you don't know about this building is that it has one of the preeminent art collections. It's an incredible contemporary art collection. This is the daughter of Jerry Jones. That as part of the entertainment experience, you realize that people in Dallas, they go to the stadium not just for the football game. This is a full day event. People pay a lot of money to go into the stadium, and they need to have a real experience beyond the sports experience. And incorporating art, contemporary art, into the building was a key part of that. And you had some incredibly famous artists all agreeing to participate, and maybe you'd wonder why when Jerry Jones says that 80,000 people are going to see your artwork in one day. Do you want to be in? They're in. And it was really neat to see how that gallery and the artwork was incorporated into the stadium. Now, of course, we had some very hard-hitting interviews with people that used the building. I know George likes that. People talk about details like this. They mention on TV all the time, this giant screen. It's the biggest screen in the world and all of that. And certainly we do call attention to things like that. But I think what's more interesting for me was that this is really the control room. There's a fleet of people in there really controlling that screen. It's a very technologically advanced piece of equipment. It's pretty interesting to see that. And so along those lines, we do go behind the scenes to really understand how this building works. And also going into places like the players' locker rooms, and for some reason, we're in the cheerleaders' dressing room. I have no idea why. And then neat places like the luxury suites, and just areas that maybe not everyone can see. But we do want to kind of show all of it, show as much as we can show about the building. And there I am pointing out some important details. And then, of course, before game day or on game day, we talk to the owner and we say, has this building fulfilled its expectations? Does it do what you set out for it to do? Is it successful? It's hard to know that, really. Of course, he says yes, without really then seeing for ourselves. And, if this was a month later, I could show you the final. But this is just sort of bits and pieces, which are much longer than what they would be. But I can't. Where is this? All right. But so this is that entry plaza, and that in the foreground there is Anish Kapoor. It's an incredibly well-known, highly regarded artist, and this just really you get a sense of what that's like on pregame as people begin to sort of come into that entry plaza area. There is, I think, kind of a neat thing where We have some cameras mounted in the stadium that really show how the building kind of starts from 0 people and it fills up to 80, 90,000 people. And I think you can really, it's really interesting to see how a design, which is sort of a lifeless kind of drawing, is infused with life when you have people, the sound, all of this stuff that people had talked about, to see it in person and to feel that in person. I think when we talk about the success of a project, whether it succeeded in meeting the design challenge, I think these are things that we have to experience. And then along with that, I mean, there are some really impressive kind of moments, the innovations I think that the architect and the owner came up with. For example, here, this is before the game, and they created a tunnel at the 50-yard line. On either side are sort of a club areas where fans can come and really greet the players as they come onto the field. This is filled with fog, and it's all this kind of impending excitement as the game begins. And of course, the kind of final, how the building is used and how do the fans sort of appreciate and enjoy the experience, not just the game, but whether it's the video screen, whether it's all those areas that I showed you, whether it's the view angles, all of these things are part of the design considerations that we do talk about and go into. And then finally, let's see here. As a kind of a last view, I mean, again, these things are all juxtaposed, but I think just the idea that, in a magazine where you're seeing static images without people, often in architecture magazines, it's really important for us to capture this transition from day to night, the kind of activity that the building sponsors and fosters. And I think on television or video, we can certainly do that in a way that maybe in other forms we have not been able to. And so that's one show. Now, when we hash this plan, what I realize is that these days it's not enough just to make a television show. That really has to become part of a larger enterprise. And I didn't realize all of this, but TV really becomes one part of a larger presentation, because once you have people engaged and interested in architecture, interested in design, then they want to come to a place. And this is a forum, it's a website that will have different topics. Certainly television is one of those, but different segments: design, technology, products, community, areas where people can then learn more about more about architecture and interact. And there are also two components there at the end. One is the American Institute of Architects. This is the place where, this is the professional organization of architects. This is where they're able to then speak to the general public. And I think the last segment there is called Education, and Northeastern is a partner with this show, meaning we will have, for example, this lecture course, your summer course in architecture. A lot of content from Northeastern will be on this website. And this is not just because George and I are friends. This is because I think that Northeastern, of all the schools that I've been associated with, and there's been a lot, is really the place I think seems to me to be in touch with where the practice is, the profession of architecture. I always sort of admire what George has done with the program, and I think courses like this are fantastic. So I think that this is a logical kind of fit, and hopefully this becomes a place for you guys, but others others from really internationally too, can come here to this site and really begin to interact with all of this content. And I think what makes it unique is that this is not necessarily just for architects or designers. And in fact, again, as I mentioned, it's not really important for me to capture that audience. They already like architecture. It's really the late people. It's people that might have a passing interest in it. I really want to try to find a place that they can come and really get more information about it, feel engaged with the subject. Well, it's coming in April, as I say. We have a website. If you would go there, I would appreciate it, and maybe like us on Facebook, because we have so few likes right now. It's very embarrassing. So if you would take the time and do that, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, I think this is really, this is great, obviously, again, not just because we're friends, but because you have taken on a challenge which, despite the widespread transformation in our profession, and also, let's face it, lots of others, the sort of double whammy of the recent transformative recession that still doesn't seem to be fully recovered from, but then the ongoing pressure of technological change and transformation of our industry, the legal profession, the journalism profession, the medical profession is probably about to experience more change than any of them. So all of these things, all these contexts are changing, and I just appreciate the desire to foreground that by reaching out to a public. One can imagine actually some shows about like the medical profession, but from not a medical drama like ER, but you know what it's like from the perspective of the patient. And it seems to me that's kind of what you're trying to do with Cool Spaces is I suppose, have empathy for the general public and try to help them understand what value this brings to it. But maybe you want to tell me a little bit about, let's say in the first episode when you have the large collective spaces, what would you like viewers to take away from seeing that show?
I think that that we are not trying to teach people or educate people. And when you pitch something like this to people, network people, they don't really want to hear that. They want to hear that the viewer is going to have an interesting experience, and that actually the ambition for the amount of takeaway is very little. That if they take away 2 things from that building, 1 building, that's pretty good.
Right.
Times 3 buildings, that's 6 things that they take away. That's a lot. I said, okay, so that's not too high. We can try to achieve that, but we have to do that, and it's going to have to be done in a way that people find entertaining. It feels like they're kind of watching a travel show or a sort of an immersive journey where they discover things, but they don't feel like they're consciously kind of learning something.
No, I know. Yeah.
So that's a challenge, and it's something that I had to get over. And I think that when I talk to architects, they say we should make it like this, make it like that. You have to kind of know where I've been and who I've talked to understand that that's really. I thank you for your input, but we need to. If you want this to work, then it has to be a certain way. So the takeaway is that you next time. Well, first of all, like the Dallas Cowboys Stadium, you go to that building, or you want to go to that building, or if you don't want to go to that building, you understand where it came from. That you understand that somebody issued a challenge. Someone said, "This is what I need for this to work," and that I think that basically the design team did a very good job in meeting that challenge. And in the end, that you can only determine that success by your experience or someone's experience there. Because as much as the architect can say this or that, or the critic can say this or that, you go there and you say, did you have that experience that you were hoping for? Is it doing what was set out, what the goal was? And you yourself can say, yeah, I'm enjoying this space, or the concert hall, which is one of those. The performance is fantastic.
Right.
It does what I was hoping for.
Well, the reason I think that this is so much about empathy is that you don't need to slam the way architects talk to each other. You and I both know the incredibly narrow focus on people-less, isolated, abstract images as though buildings were discrete sculptures or works of art. But simply by focusing on the word experience, on the idea of people who are not the client and how they experience it, it turns it from an art project into a creative problem-solving project. And since I was one of those architects, as you recall, who said, no, Stephen, here are the things you should do that you're not doing, mea culpa, I think actually changing, you have set out to achieve things that are actually achievable. Simply changing the focus to experience from abstract art images that we grew up on looking at in architecture magazines is I think probably a pretty big deal.
And you guys should hopefully appreciate this. I mean, most architecture magazines, there's no people in them. These are like very pristine images, and they're also static. They're just pictures, right? One shot in time. And I said, boy, video would make so much more sense. And when I went to the EIA and I asked them, will you guys help support this project? They said, well, we're going to give money to NPR. I said, the radio? Architecture on the radio? How's that going to work?
It's like dancing
Imagine
about
this
architecture.
space. It's so interesting. I said, come on.
Too bad you can't see it.
And you think that it's so logical, right? You say, oh, that doesn't exist. This should be easy. And actually in television, it's very bad that it doesn't exist. It's very bad. You say, look, we're going to do this. It's not out there. Right. Then they say, how is it going to rate? What do you mean it's not out there? No one's doing it? You say, why aren't they doing it? Right. It's a very big hurdle. Right. And if television shows you watch, the shows that do very well are the ones that are variations on a theme, variations on ones that are working, that have formulas existing. You tweak it with known characters and known stars and what have you. That's what works. Right. Something new is very bad because no one's going to stick their neck out for you on a subject that seems esoteric and maybe
It smacks of learning.
I'd rather someone else take that shot. It's very challenging. It's a very challenging thing, so. What was the question?
Well, it's no, but it's analogous to, I mean, the challenge of it. I mean, you talked about how we depict architecture in architecture magazines as a static art, pristine scene. Set up the scene, then I'll take the picture of it. Well, it's a lot like fashion. I mean, flip through the pages of Vogue, and you do not see people living their normal lives, right? It doesn't show Heidi Klum getting up and having breakfast in the morning. It shows, Heidi Klum in a special pose in an extraordinarily expensive dress or whatever. Well, I think this analogy that has been made before between haute couture and pret-a-porter, or between fashion and ready-to-wear, is exactly the kind of thing you're getting at, because when you advertise clothes that you and I might buy, you show people doing things in them. You don't show the sport coat without anybody in it, you know what I mean, in a still shot. You show this is activewear, or this is, you'll look great in a tux, or whatever. But you see people experiencing it.
One thing, this advice this guy gave me, he's a producer of a Ming Tsai television show. It's a chef, and a Todd English's show is another chef. He said that always remember that buildings are not stars, and not that but people are stars. People identify with people. They don't identify with the buildings.
So true.
That's an inanimate thing, a sculptural thing. But actually, that's a building that was created by the father who lost his father to Alzheimer's disease, that wanted to create a building to honor his father and a place basically to raise money to treat Alzheimer's. That's the story of that building. Not that building draws attention and it draws people to it, but really the story is about that guy. And every building is like that. I mean, Jerry Jones is famous and everyone knows who he is, and certainly that's one story. But he's actually not the most interesting character. He's the best known character, but everyone has a story. And I think when people identify with those people, and then you realize that the building is really just a kind of, is that the realization of that desire, I think that hopefully that'll resonate with people.
Well, I think that the kinds of images that you juxtaposed in talking about Texas Stadium, no, that was the old one, Texas Stadium. This one is called Cowboy Stadium.
Yeah, I think it's called AT&T Stadium.
Oh, AT&T. But the action, the dynamic images really do tell a different story. Like the initial sketch is still in the building as object world that we grew up in. But then once you see that it is a thing that is just a hub of 80 to 90 to 100,000 people's experience that day, it's a different thing. Yeah. And then the problem is a different problem. It's not just one of composition, it's one of entry, and we've talked a lot in this class about experience design, which is now, which is such a growing, like we have suddenly become self-conscious about that as a thing. And they all did an experience map earlier, which you could do of the Cowboy Stadium easily, about like from what it's like when you first decide to go, to when you park, to when you walk up, to when you enter, to when you make decisions about where your section is, to what you pass, the opportunities that you engage along the way. If you're going to the super expensive seats, you probably have a different set of experiences and retail opportunities than if you're going to the cheap seats.
Oh, that's absolutely right. I was going to make a point when I suddenly forgot what it was about.
Well, that's all right. That's all right. We've got plenty here. You talked about the difficulty in, well, first of all, in this career, in finding real satisfaction in being an architect during these turbulent times. And then you also talked about the need to really understand who the audience is on the TV show. And it seems to me that putting together a TV show and designing a house are actually much more analogous than I would have initially thought. Like, in other words, you have your set of things you want to do.
That's right.
And then the audience or the client has a bunch of things they want to do. How did you see similarities there?
This is right. This is I think part of the reason I failed, because most architects, when they design their house, when they design these buildings, they design what they want to design.
Right.
And what I realized is the success of all of these projects is that the owner is very involved in the process, and you need an active collaborator. Right. And not only that, often you talk about an architect, you see Frank Gehry. And by the way, when we interviewed him, he would always say, I, and I look behind him, there's 400 people behind him. I said, what do all those guys do?
come on, I know it's a we, and I know he doesn't even know how to turn the computer on. He's talking about the new technology. So it's a collaboration, okay? Not only is the architecture is a team, but there are 35 consultants. That design team is like this big. There's so many people involved. The client side has this many people involved. The builder side has this many people inside. And they talked about it as being a stool, a three-legged stool. And say each of these stools has a lot of people there. And any one of those stools, one of those legs has a problem that falls down, it doesn't get done right. All of the buildings that we showcase, they all work. I think that's really important. The question about the audience, so that's that, I think it's kind of in a way, the owner, and really it's this collaborative kind of enterprise. And I think, in practice, we'll try it again. I have a very different impression of how you do that. And by the way, I only have to take blame because I think this is the way we're taught. This is the way we're taught. We don't work in teams. And I don't know what professions you guys are in, but there's really very little that you do by yourself, and you're going to have to do by yourself. It's always going to be much more collaborative than you can ever envision.
Well, I don't know how successful we are at it, but as you know, we absolutely foreground a different approach than the one that has begat this obsession with the architect as fine artist to the exclusion of all else. Now, whether we've found the right way to do that, I leave to others to figure out. But I was just before this, I was just in my office talking with some people about learning how to be a creative problem solver first and foremost, and understanding your audience and all of that. And by the way, we're going to have that conversation in the context of designing buildings, but that's not the only place you can do it. I think this show is another step in the direction towards design becoming a much more central piece of our economy, actually, not a more peripheral one. And that it's going to be because people make the transition that you've made from, when I said I was going to solve your problems as a designer, I really meant I was going to make the thing I want to make. Well, as soon as we get past that and figure out what is the problem we're trying to solve, I think we're starting to get somewhere.
You know what happens when you design luxury condominium buildings and nice houses and lots of people? It's fun to do, but it was really the condo buildings, the big luxury buildings that Boston and I did, that you kind of feel like, I don't know, I don't care. I mean, the kitchen and the bathroom, I don't really care anymore. What am I doing here? Kind of, and I don't know who the owner is. Someone's going to buy it, and I don't know. I just don't really feel like it's that productive. I wasn't complaining about it, but I just sort of wondered, is this really what I'm trying to do? And I really do think actually maybe things like this can and I'm very naive when I say like what I hope that it will achieve, but you get some more people excited about design and architecture. Non-architects get them more interested. Maybe in some way, in small measure, that it improves the built environment because more people want better design. They ask more questions. They say, maybe I don't want to pay $99 for this houseplans.com. Maybe I should ask for a little bit more. Maybe the building can be green, or maybe it can be use different materials. Maybe it should be more permanent. Whatever the questions are, but there'll just be more interest and more questions. I think.
I think that's totally true. I mean, I think a show like this is rowing in the right direction. I mean, other things that universities can do are help people to understand what the problem is more clearly, like working with software people to develop easy ways for consumers to actually assess the quality and competence and attention to their problems that various designs are offering. Imagine a ranking or rating scale that really attested to the or really noted the, let's say, broader ecological cost of doing 8-bedroom Toll Brothers houses in rural Texas, 3 hours from anything that cost $1 million. They probably don't make those anymore. This was before the recession. But my point is, their performance on any kind of broader energy index would be awful, even if they seemed locally reasonable. So part of the job is simply allowing consumers and regular citizens to understand what value architects and designers in general can bring to the built environment. And I love that your, the bits I've seen from your show talk about really highlight the process that these folks go through, because that's the revealing thing, because it sees them solving problems that maybe a lot of viewers didn't even know people had.
Yeah, it's also, some of these projects are 20 years in the making. You have people that talk in the very beginning, They talked about how intertwined a building is from their family life, and it took 20 years of their lives, and they often break down. They're just so emotional about how much time they look back on, how much time and effort they put into a building.
Right.
You know, it occurs to me you guys are all like sort of the same age, and I think it's a really exciting time to be a young person. When I read things about like this guy at Snapchat, he's like 23 years old, and he's made a company more valuable than most of the companies that have been around forever, and you think, wow, what an exciting time to be your age. And it's probably hard for you to identify with two old guys talking about a profession that is really having a hard time, and it's not just architecture, it's TV is also having a hard time. So that's a really bad transition from one place to another place. But imagine, so I don't know again what you guys are going to study, but it's sort of an exciting time. And I also think the thing is that it's so fast. It's so fast, and how fast are things going? My son is 10. He's writing code already. Mm-hmm. So you guys will be 27 and here and doing very well, and suddenly this 19-year-old is going to come in and say, you don't need that anymore because I've.
Right.
And it's like this kind of insane kind of speed, which if I worry about too much, it makes me crazy. But I think it's an exciting time. I think that something like this, which again is a small thing in a way, it's a small thing in the sense that it's just for me it's medium because it took so long to do it. But you couldn't do this before in a way without all the tools, and then I had to kind of leverage all those tools, networks. I didn't know anyone in television. I had to find ways to kind of crack this and put this together and get it into places where people could see it. Where in the old days you have to have an agent, you'd have to do this, you have to. And so even in my own small way, this is kind of a small victory. I think it's a really exciting time. I mean, I think it's a very exciting time. I think it's a hard space that I'm trying to go into, but I think there's a lot of spaces that you guys are all kind of plugged into that it's very exciting. But at the same time, I guess I'm trying to ask you to sort of consider, and I know it's difficult, is that there are a lot of places that you thought were sort of would always be there.
Right,
a lot of professions, a lot of job descriptions. And they're all like getting stretched and twisted, and some of them are disappearing, and it's kind of freaking people out. I mean, it's like, it's nerve-wracking. Right. And it's going faster and faster and faster. So,
it's totally true. But as designers, I'm hoping, as budding designers, that these folks can look at a problem like that, the way we have looked at lots of others in this course, and realize that what's happening in many of these professions is disaggregation. In other words, our president, Joseph Allen, talks about the disaggregation of the higher education industry. That it seems likely that the same people who teach, do research, evaluate work, assign and evaluate work, and then provide credentials, or i.e. degrees, those have been the same place for a long time. Why would we think that will be that way forever in the atomized, ever disaggregating world of the internet, where everything is a bit? Well, I can take an online course, and of course these changes are already happening. I can take online courses, I could take an online course here and another one over here, and the University of California system will now accept them. Oh, okay, so my transcript as a 18-year-old in California, by the time I'm through with college, it's not just going to say I took everything at Berkeley. It's going to have, I took code here, I took 3D printing over here, I took, you know what I mean, and all of that, and then I took a few contextual courses at Berkeley, and they gave me a degree. This is disaggregation. Well, think about other fields that are all one now. Big hospitals come to mind. Why would they forever be the giant, do everything for everybody that they have been? They won't be. And so young people looking for opportunities, I think it's not actually 100% a mystery. You can put on kind of rational glasses and look at things that, I'm not sure, but that seems much likelier to be a candidate for massive creative destruction and the innovations that race in the aftermath.
I mean, there's always going to be problems. And it seems that there's always going to be space for people who work on solving those problems, whether it's a building, or a presentation, video presentation, or any other kind of, there's always a problem. I think about the Snapchat thing because this guy, this technology he developed, I said, there should be something like this. This is a while ago because there's a problem with these messages which don't go away. And the guy said he figured out this problem, right? And without any plan for monetization or how it's so valuable. People think it's so valuable.
It is astonishing, I agree.
But they're all new technologies, new opportunities, new problems created.
Right,
So, I can email, I can Twitter, I can do all this it's fantastic. Like when we use all of those things, right, to help promote us, that's great. But suddenly now, oh God, I sent something that's very bad. How can I get that back? And so someone solved that problem.
Right.
There's always, I think that there's always going to be this, and it's really, I think to me, it's very exciting that there are always new opportunities, new problems. And there's always going to be the need for someone to solve these problems. I think that's what we're trying to, in a way, problematize these buildings. We talked about it, and you said, well, it could just be, elevating, well, look at this fantastic building, how wonderful it is. And I said, that's not what it's going to be about. It's really going to be about, there was a problem, somebody had a problem. It takes 20 years to solve that problem, but it's really, someone had a problem, and how did they solve that problem?
Well, now, let's talk about the problem of getting this show to market. A 7-year project, very architectural in scale, almost like a new city hall or something in terms of that scale. So, just because I think it's so instructive for people to see, well, how do I go from insight, like, God, it'd be nice if I could take a text back, that picture text I sent, God, it'd be nice if I could take that back, bingo, okay. Now that we've identified that as a problem, then this 23-year-old went about a way to make them disappear. But you said, okay, there's a problem in our profession. It is really hard for, there seems to be this disconnect maybe between the general public and what I was told being an architect was about.
That's right.
Resulting in my profound dissatisfaction with the misalignment between my expectations and what the world provided. So you said, okay, back up. Which is the problem to solve?
And not only this, people have the impression that we're well compensated, that we're, I think, and still are highly regarded. I think that there's this, that we do so well, and there's only one guy that's building that building, and there's 400 others that maybe are not so happy.
Well, if it's any comfort, I aspire to be George Costanza, so he can aspire to be us, I think, right? I always loved when when that little running bit would occur, and it was a stand-in for, well, the most exalted thing that I can think of for Jerry's inept friend to be in a fantasy life would be an architect.
Right. There's another movie. You guys don't know this movie. It's the Woody Harrelson movie, Indecent Proposal. Do you know that movie?
Is this with Michael Douglas?
Robert Redford.
Oh, Robert Redford.
Okay, Woody Harrelson is an architect.
Oh, okay.
He teaches at SciArc. He doesn't have any money. He's a starving architect. But if he builds this dream house, then he'll become famous and everything will be solved. And then Robert Redford meets his wife at a casino and says, I'll give you $1 million if I can have your wife. Right. Because the architect says, all right, I can build my house. These are the kind of stories that I'm like, God, we're really getting beaten up here. And so you sort of take that, and I use that as a fuel to sort of keep going with this, because I think that basically again it's a TV show. It's not that I'm changing everything, but it's just more like when you say things like that, everyone laughs at you, especially people that are sort of your colleagues, and it's like, what are you doing? Except for George, I maybe probably behind your back.
I'm sure. I love everybody behind
their
their
back.
back. Sure.
There was no blueprint, so it's just kind of a lark. It seems ridiculous, and I don't really talk about it. I just say there is something really wrong. I've got to find a way to solve that issue using all different sort of methods, because I didn't know anybody, to try to figure out how then to get there. And the idea was not for me to be on air. The idea was for me, I would just sort of produce it. But then later they say, have you produced anything before?
Right.
And, these are kind of questions.
Right.
Well, not really.
How early did you go to the AIA in this?
I would say that I went there probably 3 times. 3 times, and
the first 2 times they just did not see this as a problem that needed to be solved.
No, but see, their profession, like this recession problem, is really affecting them in a really negative way, and their members are so upset with them. What are you doing for us?
Right,
it's like,
right.
oh, we're lobbying behind the scenes. We need to see something.
Right.
And despite the fact that their membership is going down, they have less resources, they said, we need to put our resources towards this. And this is when I had the conversation about NPR. I said, you guys want to give money to the radio, or you want to? And they said, let's give this a shot with this guy. So that's, and this is like any of these tales. I mean, we talk about sponsorship. Maybe you'd be surprised. I mean, I had to approach like 80 people to get 3.
That's amazing.
That's like 77 rejections. I mean, after a while, it takes its toll on you. But no one asks, no one worries about that. They only want to know, like, okay, you did it. That's right, you did it. That's all that matters. It's not baseball, like, you know. Are you doing Facebook on your, like these guys are?
No, I'm going onto Twitter to get their questions, sir.
Oh, is that how you do it?
Yeah, see? So, though we did talk about my going onto Facebook.
No, I like that idea.
While on, while on stage.
No, listen,
but no.
because I don't, I know it's fine because I'm on my phone all the time when I'm doing other things. But when I was telling George, we profiled a medical school, medical school. And it was a lecture about, I don't know, some surgery or something like that. And we had cameras all over the place. And I was standing in the back. And half the students were, like, not paying attention to the surgery. I was like, I mean, come on.
It's one thing to not pay attention to.
In architecture school, I mean, what's going to happen?
They'll surely go over it again tomorrow. Okay, here we have a question. How do you decide which buildings will be shown on the show? Are they all performance spaces?
Did you? That's from you, isn't it?
No, it is not.
George
I'm not going to betray
right.
the inherent confidence that is implicit in the Twitter culture in which this questioner and I reside.
It's actually a complicated algorithm. No, they're public buildings. These are buildings that people can visit themselves. That's really important because, HGTV, all these stuff, houses, you can never see them. So actually, you can go to that building, right? I mean, it's expensive to go there, but you can go there and you can see it for yourself. I think that's really important. And so we identified some uses: performance spaces, educational spaces, healing spaces, religious spaces, sacred spaces. So we try to find some categories.
What are the education spaces?
It's a building in, there's three. There's an elementary school, there's a high school, and there's a college, like a center. I thought it was sort of interesting to see how, all the architects always talk about the same thing. They always talk about trying to fostering social kind of communication, interaction, and they all do it different ways because when you're 5, it's different when you're 19. So it's kind of neat to see how the architecture sort of reflects that. So there's that. We said that the buildings, and this is all almost completely arbitrary, but we said 10 years or less. More completed.
Well,
so
you
they're
wanted
all
it to be
contemporary.
contemporary, yeah.
Contemporary, and that ensures that we can keep going, right? There's always new buildings to see. So it's public, it's contemporary, and then it's really kind of laying out what we think are the most provocative buildings. And yes, there's quite a bit of subjectivity there. I try not to take too much credit for it because then people start to bother me too much. I just say that it's a big organization of people that we make these difficult decisions. Is that fair?
Yeah. Hey, so, okay, 2 questions from the same person. What factors contributed to the large decay in the traditional profession of architecture? Is what accounted, I think, the question is there anything beyond, you cited the recession, but are there other factors that brought that employment number down by that much, do you think?
There's so many things. That's a good question. It's such a fundamental question. There's so many things going on that make it very challenging. I think fundamentally we have not really, I don't think people think that there's a lot of value in architectural design. I think I would like to say it's undervalued, but I don't think we've done a very good job in explaining why it's valuable, why it's important. In my little case about the houses, and I said, this is the kind of appeal I make. I said, you're going to live here for 40 years. Right. And you're going to say, well, I could pay $99. I say, all right, what can I do?
Right. Well, you can pay $99 and have a generic house. And if you want a generic life for 40 years, when you could have a customized life for 10% more, why don't you think about that? And let's make a list. Now, the trouble is, because we don't sell it as experience, the way it sounds like you were starting to try to do.
Yeah.
But they see, the public, I think, for a lot of very good reasons, has continually seen us talk about architecture as though it has really nothing to do with whoever commissioned it. What is our role? To make your house more expensive.
Right. Well,
and they say, well, just a second, actually, my wife and I have been talking, we actually don't think that's a good deliverable, making the house more expensive. We'd actually like it to cost less.
The other thing is that, a good friend of ours, a friend of yours, and someone I know well, is an architect that said in a lecture at Harvard, he said, I don't care about the client. And when architects are saying this kind of thing, and it's kind of, they all laugh, but they all say, haha, that's so funny. Right. This is very bad.
No, it's
just
terrible.
Very bad. I don't blame other people. I just say we have not made it, we have not shown how we have value. I don't mean overall, but we have not done a very good job indicating our value. And I think we also sort of demonstrably kind of thumb our nose at people that, like that person that I give example of, that it's only about, this special thing that I'm going to do. And this object that I've created. I think that, this is what a lot of people aspire to. These fancy design schools.
It is. And it takes, it really gets back to the distinction between haute couture and pret-a-porter.
What do these words mean, George?
Haute couture, high fashion,
I know that one.
and pret-a-porter, ready to wear.
Okay.
So they're the two sides of the fashion world. And you get in, we had a guest, one of my former architecture students who's now a very successful fashion designer, Michael DePaula was here earlier. And, they get into haute couture, the custom-made gowns, because if you can just get one client who's famous, then maybe people will see your things, maybe you'll get more clients, but the ultimate goal is to get into the pret-a-porter world. That's where you make the real money.
Mm-hmm.
That is Michael Kors, T-shirts or socks or something.
Right.
When he probably made his name designing, $10,000 dresses.
Right.
But the problem is we get those things confused. And this person who's saying, I don't care about the client, well, Henrik Fisker, the automobile designer who was here earlier, or frankly, for that matter, Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs famously said, he was asked, so do you use focus groups? And he said dismissively, why would I use focus groups? They don't know what they want until I show it to them. And I thought, okay, congratulations, that's fantastic, but it's not the case most of the time. Most of the time, I do need to know what the client, the user, the customer wants, and to try to give that to them better, faster, quicker, more beautifully than anybody else can. But we confuse those two. I think that's the biggest problem, is both parts exist. There will always be a demand, albeit tiny, for the $1,000 a square foot, seminal building for a non-for-profit or for a wealthy person or something like that, who wants an artistic statement first and foremost. And I'm willing to put up with the fact that there's no place to park, or that it doesn't have this is a house without a kitchen, or some other significant operational problem like that.
Right.
But not 99% of the world. 99% of the world needs that. That I think is the biggest issue.
There's a conflict because, as you graduate from school, you want to do your own thing. If you guys are, let's say, whatever field you're in, if you want to create a business, and let's say you're a graphic designer or some kind of designer, in that business, what people want of you. They want Times Roman symmetrical design layout. Mm-hmm. And you say, I want to do something kind of different. I want to do my own thing. Right. But that hurts your business. Right. What do you do? Right. This is the question. When someone says to me, I want to do a new house, I'll pay a great fee, and I like a Martha's Vineyard style, Schengen style. Can you do that for me? I said, it's possible I could do it for you, but I kind of want to do something else. Right. Well, is it a business or is it an art?
Right.
What is it? What is it? So this is my conflict. So I need to survive. I don't want to do that. I want to do this. If I don't do that, then I'm not going to survive. So what do I do? And this is I think this is going to be, it's wonderful when they intersect, but I think that you find that the marketplace is pretty tough. It's especially in our field. I think the field of architecture, when you're in school, it's not just about solving the problem. It's about solving it with kind of your stamp on it.
Yeah.
And I think probably a lot of you want to have your own stamp on something, but suddenly that stamp costs you something too, because people don't necessarily want your stamp on it.
Well, but I agree with you that it has been the fault of the schools in many respects, because
It's not just the schools.
well, the schools are a reflection of a slice of architectural culture. But the point is, it wasn't really the client who needed re-education in the situation you described. And by the way, I've experienced it too, so I'm not being critical. But it was you, or it was me, thinking that we were in this business where other people would want, just inherently, without any external forces, would want us to build exactly what we wanted.
That's right.
And Peter Dixon, who was in this course, a guest in this course, not this semester, but the first semester last spring, he's a great guy. He's an architect, trained as an architect, like me, worked at SOM first part of his career. But then he went into branding and and identity work and so forth. And, you know, everything. He said the most important thing that he has learned in his life is empathy, is understanding what the other person's problem is and getting pleasure from solving it, not frustration from not solving it the way, you know, why doesn't the client want me to solve it this way? Because that's not even relevant. What we need to do is find out what the client's problems are and take pleasure in solving them. And I think that you're right. Our architecture schools have not prepared young people for that reality. We're trying. I don't know if we're doing it well, but we're certainly trying.
That's a very good example by the Cowboys architect. That's what I was explaining. He was the right person because he listened and he was still able to process that and synthesize it and come back with something that maybe it was not exactly the way he would do it himself, but would sort of solve everyone's problem and still do something very nice. I think that he had the right, I learned a lot from him, just sort of how he managed things. And he's the least famous of the architects that we profile. We have lots of very, very famous architects.
Where's he at, HKS in Dallas?
Yeah, it's a corporate firm in Dallas, and he just, like, again, he was a young guy at the time. He's a little older now, but he was a young guy at the time, and they connected, and he listened, and he was able to kind of, again, take the, you know, this hovering owner and take all that information and process it and try to find a way to synthesize it and make something that I think is a pretty successful project. Right. And then again, how do we measure success? Well, I think that it's the fan experience, it's the bottom line. I think there's a lot of different ways to measure that. On all accounts, it seems that it's been pretty successful.
I think I told you, I'm writing a review of Soldier Field, the Chicago Bears stadium, 10 years after.
Yeah.
It's actually a little over 10 years, but
Yeah.
roughly. It's very interesting because this is a project that was extremely controversial.
Yeah.
And when I say controversial, that's, as you know, an architectural synonym for wildly unpopular at the time from most citizens. But it went ahead because it had the support of the mayor. And now, I went to Chicago recently and I rode one of their version of Hubway over to Soldier Field on a beautiful fall day. And I interviewed probably 20 people, just fans, neighbors, just a mix. And the near unanimity of their appreciation of the building now gave me pause because I thought, well, that's interesting. You know, I've always really loved this building. I've been a big champion of it. For those of you who don't know, Soldier Field in Chicago is a traditional, like old school, neoclassical, low stone stadium that was built for an Olympic bid in the 1920s. They didn't get the Olympics, but they'd hoped to, and they built this long, low stadium. And for years, the Bears played football there, but it wasn't really very good. It's like the LA Memorial Coliseum. It's long and low, and you're far away from the action, and it's not good, and it's terrible for meeting the contemporary needs of a revenue generation and TV angles and all the rest. But it was a revered old building in an important section of the city called Grant Park. And it was near the Field Museum and the John G. Shedd Aquarium and a lot of other cultural amenities. So what they did was they went in and inserted a new super high-tech stainless steel stadium that was very vertical inside the elongated donut of the existing one. And so they maintained the old and inserted the new, and it was really, it's pretty amazing. And the contrast is extremely stark. But it really actually, experientially, works great. I mean, it's great for fans, it's great for viewing angles, all this. Even though the term people used 10 or 12 years ago when there was public debate about this stadium, it was ridiculed. It's like a flying saucer landed from outer space, is what more than one person said. Fast forward 12 years, now I was interviewing these people, and they said, you know, I really like it. It's like a flying saucer just landed from outer space. It was the exact same observation. It's just that it had gone from being completely negative to now completely positive. And it's interesting because as an experience, it really works. Even if I might have originally liked it for compositional reasons, for internal architecture reasons, it ended up being a success because it really solved the problems. And I think it's very revealing.
This building, I know you hate, George, it's interesting because it's an Alzheimer's center in Las Vegas. And this is the guy's problem. His father dies from Alzheimer's. He's a very successful businessman, and he wants to create this center in Las Vegas, honor his father. He can't get a really great architect to come do this project, and he wants Frank Gehry because he thinks if he brings Frank Gehry, it'll bring a lot of attention to the building. Frank Gehry doesn't want to do it. Okay, he doesn't want to do it. He eventually convinces him to do it. Once he convinces Gehry to do it, now he's able to then go to Cleveland Clinic and get the best medical professional, the director. He says, I don't know, Las Vegas, I got Frank Gehry. He's like, all right, so he recruited this unbelievable team to Las Vegas. And the genius of this is that weird thing is actually not a hospital, that's just an event space that then he rents out to weddings and all of these kind of things in Las Vegas. Frank Gehry can kind of do this stuff because it's really hard to do that with a hospital. Right. Behind that thing is the hospital, which is still funky, but it's not as crazy as this thing.
Right.
And so together, those guys figured out a way to sort of, what is the problem? The problem was to create an Alzheimer's center in Las Vegas that then generates a lot of revenue for the clinical space behind and research. I think he's very successful. It's a weird building, but it does what it was supposed to do. And I was very impressed by that because I thought, well, what is this thing? I don't get this.
Right.
But I understood it afterwards.
Right.
He solved the problem.
Yeah, well, I find that to be, that's how we need to be. That's the great thing about this show, is that it's talking about architecture through that lens. And my early conversations with you were still, frankly, coming from a more traditional lens. And I'm delighted to see it happening this way. I don't know. I'm trying to talk to my tweet people here. Okay. Here we go. Here we go. Couple of questions regarding architecture and also engineering. Oh my goodness! It looks like we have a ton of. Anyway, do you think there'll be a resurgence in architecture, or will the profession die out?
When I was at Syracuse, I don't know, I'm laughing. When I was at Syracuse, there was a guy that one of the students was creating an app. The app would basically, and by the way, this is also being done by someone else professionally. They're creating this kind of software that will take, if you import data into the computer, you can basically have it design the stadium because it'll take the best qualities of all these different stadiums. And I don't know how this is going to really work, but people are trying very, very hard to eliminate us, right?
Well, and we would be complicit if we allowed the definition of excellence in the design of the built environment to be shaped by others. I think actually, my money is on the idea that the creative problem solving that architects do, rather than dry up and shrivel in the built environment, will actually expand to infect and engage lots of other fields. We're doing that in the school right now, and I think it's 100% true. People in business are desperate for design education. They really are. Stanford's leading the way, but there are a lot of places that are desperate to have, when we reach out to the business school, they can't answer our calls fast enough. They'd love to collaborate with us because, what business is looking for is to creatively understand different ways of looking at the problem. And that's where designers are super helpful.
Design consultancies are growing. That's like a new term, I think, relatively new, that you go to a place, this continuum, these different places, sure. and basically, I have a problem, they help solve your problem. There will be architects that will be part of organizations like that. I think there'll be less traditional architects. I think that's just the way it's going to be. There's going to be less traditional architects. You'll still have star architects.
Yeah.
I just think that base of more architects is going to be less.
I don't know that I agree with you completely on that. I think that what is clearly already happening is that the middle scale of firms is going away.
Yeah, the middle. That's right.
There are either very small firms that deal with extremely hands-on, one-on-one with individual people, perhaps not with maximum efficiency as the only goal.
Right.
And then there are the giant firms.
50,000 people.
HKS is a very big firm. But I sit on the AIA large firm, or I visit the AIA large firm roundtable every year, and it's, they're doing massive projects with all the disciplines that you're talking about. I think that what is happening is that the recession-related stuff that's over with. What's staying is the disruptive role of technology and the fact that, Ken Wiseman, who's a leading guy at Canon Design, who's a very, very big firm internationally, he says, I can get done with 100 people today what probably took 400 20 years ago.
Right, that's right.
And it's not that there's less work to do. In fact, there's more work to do.
That's right.
But in our field, just like others, the traditional production of that slice of the value is getting more efficient. And so I would say employment is going to be flat or ever so slightly rising. But I think that the demand for people trained in architecture beyond the edges of the traditional field is where the real action is.
This is from my own experience. This is what would happen. A developer would ask me to do something, and I would think about our traditional delivery. We'd say that you would do the design, do the renderings, do all of this kind of stuff. And now we'll have a rendering company do the renderings.
Right.
We'll have the real estate agent do the plans because he knows what the buyer wants.
Right.
We'll have a production company be on the ready that knows all the details, sort of already done.
Right.
What do you want me for? What do you need me for?
Right.
What do you need me for? But I do feel like there's all these different sort of, and they may be architects, some of them, but it seems like the traditional delivery of architecture is definitely.
Well, it's changed dramatically. If you think about, America's third and only architect president, Thomas Jefferson, between that time and now, we still call it architecture, but it's a completely different thing. The expectation was that Jefferson, or an architect in his day, would know everything about the building design, construction, materials, everything.
That's right.
Today, I would argue, and this is one of the reasons I think that you're going to be very successful in this enterprise, is an architect is really a communicator. An architect is really a choreographer, a coordinator of people and tasks. And so the role that, just because somebody's coming up with all the details doesn't mean that there isn't a role for somebody envisioning and kind of laying out how we're going to get to that end result. I'm not going to personally do as many of the things, but that's kind of okay because there's a whole bunch more things to get done to build Cowboy Stadium than there is to build Thomas Jefferson's Monticello.
Yeah, and not only that, in the old days you could never do a Cowboy Stadium one guy. Look at every aspect of that building is sort of the interior design, the video screen, the seat. All of these are experts. So all these, they call them consultants. There's 35 of them, 40 consultants that are brought in that are the best in their field. You can't possibly know all of these things. You can simply explain the larger vision and try to sort of keep everyone moving along that path. And it really is a collaboration between all of these consultants, what you call the design team, the owner.
Yeah, well, it's totally true. I'm sorry. I know it's very distracting when I look at my tweet friends, but I just have to check our.
That's kind of neat.
Okay, now we have another question from the same person. Do you think there's a significant overlap between both architecture and engineering? This is actually a very good question. Remember that they're all in college right now, and when you look at these fields in high school, they seem like, architecture and engineering are practically the same thing, right?
Yeah.
They're far from medicine, they're far from law, but once you're in the world, what do you think?
They're very different. It's very different worlds. I know that a lot of people say that, I wanted to be an architect, but I couldn't do the math. I can't do math. It really doesn't have a lot to do with architecture.
Right.
I think engineering is a very different. Do you mean structural engineering? What kind of engineering? Mechanical engineering, civil engineering? There's so many different kinds of engineering, but.
Well, let's just say the kinds. I'm assuming that let's say structural and civil, the kinds that we interact with the most, and not aerospace, or electrical, or.
In any project, any complex project that I'll work on, I work with a structural engineer, and I respect that domain, and we talk about kind of larger, like the Dallas Cowboy Stadium, you have these two arches, and he knew he wanted two elements like this and this guy to do something like that.
Right.
He doesn't really know how to do that.
Right.
The engineer is the one that really knows how to put that together. And I think they go back and forth trying to understand that, it's too thick, it's too thin, it's really got to move like this, but, it's going to be too heavy. I think that those questions about how it gets executed, that's really the engineer.
Right.
And I think it's a very different kind of mentalities in order to create something like that, but you need them both. There's a sort of, I don't know what I call it, creative side, but there's one side that maybe has a kind of vision about it. There's another that can really help execute it.
Sure.
But it has to go back and forth. So that's one collaboration.
Right.
The acoustical engineer, that's what I was talking about,
was very interesting. He was talking about how, again, for the stadium, you want the noise to be really loud.
Right.
But then the next day, there's a big concert there, and you don't want just loud. You want it to be really good sound. So now that the designer they have to figure out a way. And the acoustical engineer said, can you put like big black mats? No, you can't pick, So it's kind of back and forth. So that's that engineer. You've got to go down the line, every engineer, to sort of work out. And that's why, these products that we selected, I mean, it's pretty amazing that they've really solved all these problems. I mean, there's no reason. I mean, it takes time. It takes a long time. That's why these products are 10, 15 years long. I mean, really all of these experts working together to achieve the end result.
Right. Well, before we wrap up, I want to make sure there aren't any more questions. Yep. Please, come on up.
A real person?
A live human
Talking
being.
person?
Absolutely. You might want to point that down a little bit. Yeah, there you go.
So can I bring back a question that you've, Professor Thrush, have previously asked during the semester?
Sure.
And it's, have you ever taken a course that you feel has not very well prepared you for where your life has gone?
Are you referring to this course right now?
No, not this course in particular, just any course, even.
Yeah, save that for the trace reviews, right?
Boy.
Or the converse.
Yeah.
Is there any course that you took in college that ended up having a wildly more kind of productive side than you would have guessed at the time?
I think I was not a great student, but I think that the courses that have lots of information, actually I didn't find it to be that useful. Here's lots of data. I think that the design courses, the studio courses are different for architecture. Maybe you take studio courses, but when you are able to interact with, let's say, an advisor or somebody you admire, or a designer, or whatever, an architect, and you sort of are able to talk not just about the project, but also just to talk about other things, about, what should I do here? Tell me. And to have someone who has a good hand, in the sense, meaning that someone who can advise and maybe not give you the answer, but sort of bump you along and push you this way and that way and help you find things. I remember those times. I do remember certain people that just through advice and through sort of, I guess it's advice. I don't remember like information. I think it was just more like, I'm having a hard time here. I don't quite figure, I don't know what I should do here. Can you give me some suggestions? And something like that. I think that those I found the most useful. I think lecture classes I always found a little bit more, sorry.
No, it's completely fine.
I find them more difficult. That's me.
We're immune to criticism.
You know it's funny because I don't know, is it MOOCs or something like this?
MOOCs.
Okay, but
Massive
at
open
MIT it's
online
going
courses.
crazy because my wife's all doing all of this, and suddenly all your coursework is available online to the rest of the world, and everyone thinks, oh my God, what's going to happen? Everything's going to fall apart. And I think about my educational experiences. I say I learned from my classmates and being in the studio late at night and interacting with them. I don't know. I can get information anywhere, but I kind of want to be in a place where there's a forum and you can discuss. And
This is the disaggregation that we're talking about.
Yeah,
this is
I
absolutely going to happen. That you're going to get all your information in a lecture, I think is going to go away, and you're going to end up with, ironically, with small seminar-like things that are about context and discussion and advice and so forth. Please.
Yeah. So through doing this show and seeing all these cool buildings all over the world and stuff, has that given you any sort of motivation or kind of want to go out and
go back,
design your own building? Yeah, something that would be maybe featured on a show like this.
Yeah, I would like to do that. I would like to go back, but it's hard to go back now. It takes a lot more out of me than I thought it was going to take. But it's like a PhD. It really is like a PhD, because what better way than to, you see this building by Frank Gehry, what better way to learn something about it than to talk to him, go into his office, see how he works, have him explain things to me. He's actually nice to me because we're on camera, so to have all of that happening, and then talk to the owner, talk to the builder, see the thing from beginning to end. It's like that's one sort of almost dissertation, right? And to do that 3 times per episode times 4, so 12. I think it's like, I get really inspired, I get really excited. Hopefully that comes across because it's really important that I be interested and excited. And then, yes, I want to do it myself. I think, God, I wish I could. But in order to do practice really well, these people that we profile, these people are like, they're crazy. They don't, like when we were trying to schedule certain people, I said, well, I don't know. I know August will be tough because you maybe take vacation. It's like, oh, he doesn't take vacation. I mean, or come Sunday, we're here. I mean, it's like these people are so, like for example, Nader Tarani, these people are they're crazed. Like, if you're not doing it with that level of intensity, you're not going to do it. Like, I can't part-time do this kind of, you can't do it. You're either doing it or you're not doing it. So hopefully you do it for a little while and people don't hate it, and then we can do it for a little while longer, and then once it's done, which it will be done, and someone else will do their own thing, and it'll be a different show, whatever.
I suspect, though, that
go back.
there's opportunities for you to, I think there will be more opportunities to collaborate with people moving forward, and that the idea of the kind of all or nothing, I'm a sole proprietor, 70 hours a week is the only, it's either that or I'm not doing it, I think is going away, because
Okay, good, I would like that.
I mean, I get contacted all the time
Really?
about participating in a kind of advisory role on this project or that
Right.
project. And it makes me think that this disaggregation is really happening everywhere. And think about it, these giant firms, AECom and Stantec and so forth.
Design consultants?
Well, Gensler, one of our guests this semester is a great guy named Jordan Goldstein, who's the managing partner of Gensler's office in Washington, D.C. Just a fabulously interesting guy. And, Gensler has pioneered for years, decades, the whole, we don't just design buildings. We are your go-to management consultant for everything. And as a result, of course, they're thriving. And they have lots of different kinds of people. They're like IDEO or Continuum in the built environment. That's more architecture-based. So I think there's all these changes are offering up more opportunities at the same time that they're eliminating others, I think.
Thank you, George.
It's true. All right. Any final questions? Okay. Well, thank you, Stephen, very much.
Thank you.